So there has been a splurge of self-love advice all over social media, right? On Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, in books, in YouTube videos even. And honestly, a lot of this self-love stuff is actually becoming and turning into self-obsession. Now, with self-obsession, there is a place and time for it. It can be beneficial at times. However, if you're anyone like me and you like to take the same concept and look at it from different viewpoints, different perspectives, that's what we are going to be doing in this video, to give this topic of self-obsession some depth, some nuance, and, just kind of break it down a little bit more. Because I have noticed, supposedly, when self-obsession, being obsessed with yourself, is meant to help you find love, I've actually found that for many women, it's actually unconsciously, unintentionally pushing love away for them. So let's quickly talk about that. Let's quickly talk about this whole being obsessed with yourself and people being obsessed with the wanting to be obsessed with themselves, if that makes sense, and break it down from there. So to give you some context, let's say that you have spent years being a people pleaser, right? You've done the people pleasing, you've done the overgiving, you've done the neglecting yourself and abandoning yourself to compromise for other people and try to sacrifice for them. When you do that, when you have been in that place for so long, there is this very strong urge to swing to the complete opposite direction, right? To the opposite end of the spectrum and do the other extreme. It's like you're trying to self-correct, but you are actually over self-correcting. It feels like you're reclaiming your power, right? You go from I'm the last on my list to I am literally the one and only on my list. It's this very strong swing in the other direction. But here is actually what I think is happening psychologically, and this is what I don't see many people talk about. When you have been a doormat, the reality of how you let yourself be treated is actually so painful to you that your mind can't handle looking at it directly. Like really sitting with the fact that you gave your all to these people who didn't value you. You ignored the red flags. You abandoned yourself over and over again. To sit with yourself and accept that happened, that is actually devastating and extremely uncomfortable for most people to do. And so instead of processing that, your brain actually jumps to this new rule and it says, okay, never again. You are going to be so independent, so self-focused, so self-obsessed that no one can ever hurt you like that again. It becomes this protective mechanism, I feel, because that energy, it can overlap with self-protection, where extreme self-love actually feels safer than risking any sort of vulnerability with anyone else ever again. And to be completely honest, I get it. I can relate. When you have been hurt, when you've been burned, the idea of putting yourself first feels revolutionary. It feels really good. For the first time, you're not bending yourself over backwards for someone else's comfort. You're not ignoring your needs. It feels very powerful, and it definitely has a place, this feeling. But here is the thing. Healing isn't supposed to be about extremes. To me, true empowerment is more like learning to center yourself without completely erasing everyone else and without putting up this wall and barrier around you to protect love from coming in again. Let me give you some examples of what this might look like in real life. So let's say, there's this girl who posts daily affirmations about how she's her own soulmate. She doesn't need nobody. She doesn't need anyone in her life. She is all she needs. That sometimes that can be true, and it can be confidence, but that can also be a defense mechanism. Or let's say the woman who is so proud of eating dinner alone, traveling alone, doing every single thing alone, that she has forgotten how to share her time and energy with someone close to her and let other people in. She's built up this wall around her, essentially, that is preventing love from getting in. Now, don't get me wrong, doing things solo is amazing. I love doing solo things as well, and it's necessary. However, when it becomes your entire identity, when you start to judge people who want partnerships as being not independent enough, not loving enough, not self-loving enough, that is when the self-love has crossed into self-obsession territory and self-protective mechanism territory. So for people who used to be doormats, vulnerability feels super dangerous because it was once associated with being taken advantage of. And that reality is obviously very painful to have to face the fact that someone didn't value you as much as you would have liked to be valued. So what most people end up doing is that they armor this up with hyper independence and they call it self-love. They use it as a way to avoid any discomfort of letting people in again. But the reality of this is actually just a very polished way of saying, I don't want to risk being hurt again. I don't want to take that risk. It feels safer to me to be self-obsessed and only focusing on myself, because then no one can hurt me if no one manages to get close enough to me. And this is where it gets really interesting. This version of self-love often comes with a lot of judgment towards your past self. There is probably a part of you that is thinking, I was so stupid for tolerating that. I can't believe that I let them treat me that way. There is this underlying anger that is festering underneath, and also shame. And that gets covered up with this mask of empowerment, of self-love, of self-obsession. I love myself so much. I'm obsessed with myself. But the real healing, that also includes compassion for who you were in the past when you didn't know better, or when you did know better and you still weren't able to break out of those patterns. Having compassion for that version. It's not about punishing your past self and never letting yourself be vulnerable again, because unconsciously and unintentionally, that's what I feel a lot of people are doing these days. So in the beginning, focusing on yourself feels amazing, right? Like, especially if you're used to neglecting yourself for others. But over time, it starts getting very isolating very quickly. We are literally wired for connection, but self-obsession can start to feel empty because it doesn't fulfill that fundamental need to actually share yourself and aspects of yourself with someone that you trust. Because your walls are so high that no one has actually been able to get in. I've seen women who have been so proud of their self-love journey, but have secretly been very lonely. They've created this perfect life on paper. They have their routine, they have their boundaries, their solo trips, solo dates, but something is still missing. And they start to realize that loving yourself in isolation isn't actually as fulfilling as they thought it might be. And then they feel guilty or ashamed for wanting connection because they've been told that needing others means you're not healed enough or you're codependent. So you're stuck in this cycle where they want love, but they feel like they're betraying their independence by admitting it. And also, let's talk about social media. Social media can make this so much worse, by the way. Every day you are seeing quotes like, be so busy loving yourself that you have no time for hate, regret, or fear. Or things like, you can't love someone else until you love yourself. Those sound very inspiring, but they are actually creating this impossible standard. And the message becomes, if you are not 100% obsessed with yourself, if you have any desire for a partnership, if you are feeling lonely sometimes, you're doing it wrong. That means you're doing it wrong. It means you're not loving yourself enough. It means you're being clingy and codependent, that you need to go back to the drawing board and love yourself harder. But that is not how humans work. We are social creatures. Even the most independent person benefits from an emotionally intimate connection and sharing themselves with someone else. And that is what I'm here to unpack today with you guys, because there's so much nuance when it comes to self-love. It is 100% important and necessary. I'm not here to bash that. I'm not here to deny the place that self-love has, knowing your worth, how to set boundaries, taking care of your mental health, taking care of yourself physically and emotionally. They are all crucial. But a lot of people take the self-love advice and accidentally twist it into self-obsession, where healing becomes this endless project. You're constantly working on yourself and never actually stepping into real connections with others, because you have turned self-love into this full-time job and almost a limitation that you put on yourself, where you say, I cannot be in a relationship until I reach this milestone in self-love. So for many people, their idea of self-love slowly turns into this fortress that they have around them. No one's getting through. So what first starts off as, I don't need anyone to complete me, slowly starts to morph into, I won't let anyone in. And that door is closed. My fortress is up. You've become so good at becoming self-sufficient that you unconsciously make zero space for partnership, even though on the surface level you keep saying you want it. And here is the irony. True relationships need that space to grow. Emotional intimacy isn't about needing someone, but it's about requiring you to actually let someone in. You have to let that fortress down in order for you to receive that love. And I'll let you in on a secret when it comes to men, okay? Emotionally mature men, they actually want to feel needed. Not in a codependent or clingy way, but it's more in a natural kind of human way. They want to feel like they bring value to your life. If you're a man, please confirm in the comments if this has been your experience as well, or good if it's not. But if your whole vibe is, I don't need anyone, I've got everything handled, I don't need anything from anyone ever, you come across as very closed off, and you unintentionally push away the kind of men that you actually want to have relationships with, even if you don't mean to. I've had conversations with men who have told me that they felt like they couldn't add anything to certain women's life because she had her career so figured out, her emotional needs were met through therapy and friends, and her physical needs were met through self-care routines, blah, blah, blah. What was left for him was really nothing. There was no emotional space to allow that partnership to come through. And before you come for me, I'm not saying you should need a man to complete you. Let's not think in black and white here. But there is a difference between being complete and being completely closed off. Right? Healthy relationships involve some level of interdependence. I want you to really wire that word into your brain, interdependence. You both bring something to the table. You both benefit from the connection. You know how to operate when they're not around, but you also know how to operate when you let them in and you let them close into your life and share parts of yourself with them. Interdependence. And here's the other thing that I'm starting to see more and more of with the people that I'm talking with. There is this notion of, I need to love myself more before I'm ready to enter a relationship. It sounds so noble, right? It sounds so mature, so demure. But to be honest, and if you are being honest with yourself, is that really about readiness, about being ready, or is it the fear of vulnerability? Like, there is always going to be another layer of healing to do. I'm gonna tell you that. There's always another trigger to work through and process. There's always another pattern to break, another limiting belief to challenge and release. If you wait until you are 100% healed, or whatever your version of healed looks like to you, you are literally waiting forever. That is just the truth. of the situation. You will literally be waiting forever. And here's what's actually happening. You are using self-improvement as a way to avoid the messiness of real relationships, because relationships, they can be messy. They can trigger you. They can show you parts of you that you didn't know existed. And to some extent, they require some sort of compromise. Compromise is not the same as self-sacrifice, by the way. You shouldn't be sacrificing your values and your identity for any relationships. But the communication and needing to put someone else's needs alongside your own, not above, not below, but alongside and considering them. So sometimes the deeper healing actually happens inside that relationship, not outside of them. You learn things about yourself when you're in connection with someone else that you can't really learn when you're in isolation just by yourself. And you develop the capacity to emotionally regulate under pressure or in moments of conflict and create that genuine intimacy with your special person. Right? We've been sold this idea that you have to be perfect before you are worthy of love, but that is not true. That is just not true. And this is where I see so many women start to constantly monitor themselves and check in with themselves, asking them, am I loving myself enough today? And it becomes like this metric to hit, right? Another standard to perfect. And this is where it gets really twisted, because now you are performing self-love the same way you used to perform for others. Real self-acceptance is not a performance. It's not something you prove to yourself every day. It's just something you live by. If you are obsessively monitoring whether you're doing self-love correctly, you're actually stuck in this loop of self-critique, which is kind of the opposite of love, if you really think about it, isn't it? And here is the biggest paradox that I want to share with you. The more obsessed you become with loving yourself for the sake of attracting someone into your life, the more you actually repel them. Because authentic love, the type of self-love and romantic love that is truly authentic and sincere, it isn't forced or performed. It's just natural and effortless. So when you are genuinely comfortable with yourself, you don't need to constantly announce it. You don't need to prove your independence to the world and to your potential partners. You can want a partnership without feeling like you are betraying yourself. And if it feels like you're betraying yourself every time you want a partnership, that is also saying something. Is it really love if you are telling yourself that you are essentially not worthy of being in a relationship until you learn how to love yourself perfectly first? Because imagine telling that to a child. But like I said, self-love has its place. Authentic self-love has its place. It 1,000% has its benefits when it comes to co-creating a relationship that feels more fulfilling and feels more relaxed. But where does that start to tip over? Into self-protection, into self-obsession. That is what I'm trying to say here. So what does healthy self-love actually look like? Let's talk about that. It's loving yourself enough to want good things for yourself, including healthy relationships. It's having boundaries, but also being able to let people through them and not have it be a wall that surrounds you. It's being independent, but not isolating yourself and learning interdependence. It's healing your wounds without making healing your entire identity and full-time job. It's recognizing that you can be whole and complete as an individual and still want to share your life with someone else, and in fact allowed to share your life with someone else and want that. Those two things aren't contradictory. They actually are very beautiful together. So that's all I have for you guys today. If you enjoyed this video, let me know. Let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear them. I hope you have a great week. Bye.